Welcome back to the Daily Dope. I am Brandon, your host. Brandon Strong over here. And let's see. Today was the third meeting of this new Michigan Medical Marijuana Licensing Board, which was formed, almost 10 years after the program was legalized. Basically, the state did not want to have anything to do with the program except for loosely interpreting the really vague law as to meaning that, okay, there's a few things out here that's protecting patients to use medical marijuana, but other than that, everything else is illegal still. So just because they didn't say that, oh, we're going to set up a system with dispensaries and all this shit, just because that wasn't in the original law, they were deemed illegal. And it took until 2013 for a Supreme Court decision to say that they basically were illegal. Now, one might argue that that Supreme Court decision is bullshit too, because, just because something isn't written into the law doesn't mean it's illegal. So the state, to try to save faith with the patients that are already, we're talking about over 100,000 patients at the time. So to not throw them under the bus, the state decided to be like, okay, well, we'll make the rules then for the dispensaries. And there was other contention items such as medical marijuana edibles. We call them medibles here. And another one was the concentrates. So the state decided to write some regulations, but they decided, well, we're going to do this licensing thing in December 15th. That was part of the new law that they finally passed in 2016, 8 years after the law was enacted. Now they want to really get their grips around it with, quite frankly, this medical marijuana licensing board. Before, most of the things that had to do with medical marijuana, I don't know if you want to call it regulated or controlled, but it was done through the licensing and regulations, which is called LORA in Michigan. But they're not the end-all authority either. I guess comes down to it, the cops still think they're the authority. So today was the meeting. Now I'm just gonna touch back on the last meeting one more time. There was two meetings before this, and the meeting right before this, one of the board members, Don Bailey, who happens to also be a former Michigan State police officer, who also happens to be the Michigan State police officer who was a former DEA trainee or something like that. Anyway, he basically he's never had very good things to say about medical marijuana. As a matter of fact, he's been throwing medical marijuana under the bus the whole time. Here's a little dossier on him. When he was appointed, then there's this little write-up here in the Monroe News about the medical marijuana members, licensing board members. So Donald Bailey of Traverse City recently retired as a sergeant of the Michigan State Police with 36 years law enforcement and investigative experience. Bailey holds a bachelor degree in criminal justice from the Eastern Michigan University, attended the Drug Enforcement Agency's Drug Unit Commanders Academy, and received a certificate from the Northwestern University Center for Public Safety in Police Management, Staff, and Command. He will represent Republicans. So that's basically a little bit of a background story on that one particular member. There was another member that was a former prosecutor, I believe, or maybe the former, I can't remember exactly what, but he was siding with Bailey at the last meeting when they decided to open and close the meeting with the threat that they wanted to shut down all of the dispensaries that are currently opened in Michigan and they should be shut down by September. I think the date they threw out there was like 15th. That would be devastating, because that would be thousands of dispensaries getting shut down. The current system in Michigan was that people that grow in the medical marijuana program, sometimes they have overage, which means they have too much marijuana, so they can't hold on to it, which is a ridiculous thing that should have been. I mean, they should have thought about this when the people that originally wrote this law. I have a lot of problems with the original law that was the 2008 medical marijuana, Michigan medical marijuana program. There's a lot of things in there that just kind of leave it open to interpretation, and then there's stuff that should be in there like this. All of it, the dispensaries, the overage, there shouldn't be overage. So you can grow 12 plants for a patient. And then when you get those 12 plants harvested, you can give your patient 2.5 ounces, because that's all they're allowed to have at once. And then you can keep 2.5 ounces for them for later. And then the rest of it, so that's 5 ounces out of 12 plants. All the rest of that, what'd you do with that? Well, most people made medicine out of it, because, to take an ounce to make like 3 grams of oil or less. So, people were doing lots of creative things with it. But one of the things that you could do with it is take it to a dispensary, and they would buy it so that they could sell it to people that don't have caregivers. Well, that's another thing that they call patient-to-patient transfers, which apparently also applies to caregivers. And how it applies to caregivers, well, first of all, patients aren't allowed to transfer to another patient. Thank you again, 2008 law. I don't know why that was ever a thing. That should have been addressed in the law. It should have been like, well, yeah, patients can transfer to patients, and caregivers should be able to transfer to any patients as well. Why shouldn't they be able to? So basically, my opinion only, here's my opinion again, the way that the state police and Don Bailey want to interpret the law is that, you grow them 12 plants, you throw that 5 ounces out to the patient, one to you keep 2.5 for later for them, and you give them 2.5 now. All the other cannabis that's left over, you're just a sitting duck with leftover cannabis. Or if you try to transfer it to somebody that's not your patient, you can go to jail. It's almost set up the way that Johnson or Bailey, the way he wants to say it's being played out, sounds to me like they want to have it like that so that they can nab people when they're selling it to the people that aren't their patients. Obviously, dispensaries, you can't have a dispensary business model where the person that runs the dispensary only has the 5 people that is his patients that are coming to the dispensary to get the medicine. That would make it so that they would have to constantly, basically on harvest day, all your patients would have to come in, get all the marijuana that they can carry, go sell it illegally, then come back and do it again until everybody has the right amount of weed. This is just absurd, man. To just say, oh, well, you can't take the overage to a dispensary. Now I understand the reasoning is that you need to have it tested. That's cool. Nobody that has this overage is worried about a few dollars that it would cost to have their batches of cannabis tested. It's never been a big concern. No one's ever been like, oh no, that's too big of a bridge to cross for me. That's too much regulation. I can't do business anymore. No one ever did that. Problem is what you expect out of the testing and the time. Like I've had tests that took sometimes as many as a week or 2 to come back. And when that kind of stuff happens, then, you're kind of still stuck with all the overage. So, and then you got this whole idea that with the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act, mind you, they're going to make it so if you're a producer of cannabis, as soon as you're done growing it, then the transporter comes and picks it all up. So you don't even get to be involved in the processing or anything else after that. So I don't know who would even want to be involved with the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. It doesn't sound like anybody really wants to be involved, but it also sounds to me like this. Like the state they want this thing to take over. And they want they want people that are going to be involved in it that are going to be happy to just do whatever is on the books, their new regulations, and then just go ahead and sell to the to all. That's another thing about it is once these licensed facilities get up and running, they're going to be able to sell to anybody that walks through the door that has a med card. So I don't understand all the ways in which Don Bailey and other people that have his line of thinking towards the program, it sounds like they just want to shut it down. Constantly sounds like they just want to shut it down. It's all I'm hearing out of it. So let's read the little bit of stuff I have on this. And at the end, I'm going to tell you, like I spent a lot of today listening to live streams from the meeting. So I got to hear a lot of the public, the public comments time. And I've heard a lot of people talk, and it was very refreshing to hear a lot of these voices, and quite frankly, to see a lot of people that watch this channel were there, a lot of people that are on my Facebook friends list or have been for a long time. They might know me as Strong Meds when I used to be really active on Facebook, posting a lot of stuff about what was going on. And now I do this, so I don't have time to do that. But yeah, I heard y'all. I heard you loud and clear. I wish I could have been there. Everybody's probably like, wow, why wasn't you at any of these meetings? Well, to be honest, I could go there and say some things, but this is about the dispensaries more than anything else. And it's current dispensaries that are already operating. And they're important. Their voices are important, and the patients' voices are important. Now, if I would have went, I would have strictly went there to speak for patients because that's the only angle I have on that. I don't want to go there and just be loud, because there was a lot of people that went there and they just had some shit that they wanted to say. And unfortunately, they usually what that was something that probably only would have took 30 seconds, maybe a minute, but they had the whole time allotted to them, and then they just kept stuttering and they didn't really know what the fuck. Half of the people I was hearing that wasn't, people that I'm familiar with basically sounded like they're not very good public speakers. Other people went up there with an agenda. It didn't make any sense. Like there was even a Reefer Madness lady that was talking about her son that sounded to me like he had a degenerative brain disease, and he died. But she was acting like he faked whatever it was to get medical marijuana, and I don't know. She was just rambling about it, and I didn't want to be that person, because I didn't want to go in there and then start talking and just waste everybody's time with whatever I could have said. But it would have been really nice if I could have went there just to listen and see what everybody else said. And that's why I spent a lot of my time today listening to the live streams that were available. And there was a news channel that had a couple of live streams, so a good portion of it was covered there. And in all that, and I think this is important to mention, there was at one point somebody said, hey, let me hear a I or something like that, for everybody that feels that Don Bailey should not be on this board. And I mean, everybody's hands went up, and you heard everybody at the same time, like, yeah, like that was, for the room, that was unanimous. So Bailey was sitting there listening to that, and, that's what he heard. Was he there? There he is right there. There's Bailey. Here's the rest of the board. Let me go ahead and read this. I think I said everything else I wanted to say. I'm sure I'll say some more as I read through. Existing medical marijuana dispensaries could be in danger of being shuttered by law enforcement if they stay open past mid-December, according to Andrew Bispo, a top state marijuana regulator. Quote, the Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, otherwise known as LORA, will not shut down facilities, Briscoe said Tuesday. But dispensaries that continue distributing medical marijuana to patients after the state begins accepting applications for dispensaries to get state licenses on December 15th risk being closed by law enforcement, he added. So I guess the idea here is in good faith on the 15th of December, if you have a dispensary right now, you're going to hand in an application to whatever municipality you live in, if they even allow it. You're going to hand in your application, and then you're going to shut your dispensary down until they come back with a yes or a no. And at which time you won't be able to open right back up, because I guarantee you that the next thing that the Rules Committee is going to say is that the only thing you can sell is stuff that has been produced by the regulated system. So all this old marijuana won't be able to be sold legitimately. So, I mean, and they're not talking about that. If that was something that somebody was talking about, I missed it. But what is going to happen, and I've seen it happen in other states that did this transition, you know what happens? Is they're like in Oregon, they're like, well, you know, now the regulation kicked in and we have to have the stuff tested and all this shit, and yet we have all this inventory. Every dispensary had the same problem. We have all this inventory. And they have a regulation board like Laura at the time that wrote a special rule for them to be able to sell the inventory that they had. So, you know, this is all possible to do this without shedding blood, guys. That's basically what I'm going to say. But what this guy said is if you're operating after the 15th, whether you put an application in or not, you could get the door kicked in. You risk, and that's the quote, risk being closed by law enforcement. And I'm going to say it again, man, medical marijuana, only fucking place in the whole world where small government Republicans are out there regulating the fuck out of it. I mean, this is ridiculous. And having it so that if your numbers are off a little bit, or if you don't, you know, do this or do that, then the cops are what kicks in your door and you get felony charges. So I don't think that when Michigan, you know, when the legislator kicked out those medical marijuana laws last year, they weren't doing it in the best interest of anybody except for the people that want to take this shit over. Or in Mr. Bailey's case, possibly people that just want to shut it right down or make it, you know, throw such a big wrench in it that it just fails. Brisboe said the department has and will not ask law enforcement to close such dispensaries. However, that would be at the sole discretion of law enforcement. Well, that's because he don't want to look like he's ordering the cops around, because they're just the regulatory agency. It ain't their job to be like, sick 'em boys. You know, they're not fucking releasing the hounds. So his comments came during the state's third medical marijuana licensing board meeting Tuesday, just hours after Laura issued a statement that appeared to put pot shops on notice for potential closure, considering them a potential impediment to licensure if they stay open after December 15th. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure that if you put an application in and you don't close and you're still open on the 16th and they get your application in the mail on the 18th or something, they're going to look out the window and see you're still open and be like, no. And I mean, we're talking about Don Bailey is on the licensing board. So somehow they're going to make a rule to where they have the final say in licenses or some shit. Or maybe they already do. And he already made it clear that he's not going to give anybody a license if he knows they're open, or he's saying if they're still open today after this meeting. I'm pretty sure he knows who he's really focused in on, and he really wants to make life hard for a certain amount of people. Tuesday's meeting was marked by confusion and internal disagreement within the board and worry from patients who feared they wouldn't be able to find medicine. Now, that was probably the number one refrain that I kept hearing when I was listening to the comments from the public, is patients and representatives from dispensaries and other and doctors themselves and people representing doctors, all talking about how patients are the ones that are getting left in the cold here. And that's basically the biggest problem with this, is even if, like I said earlier, you know, even if you get your application in, You close your doors by the 16th of December, and then boom, they say you're approved. And then you open your door back up, you flip the open sign back over to open on, say, like January something. They said early spring, the licenses will be approved, and people will know that their license has been approved or whatever. So sometime in the spring, perhaps, you're able to flip that sign back to open. Is there even going to be any cannabis? Because that's the same time someone's going to get their application approved for a growing facility. That's the same time somebody's going to get their application approved for a transporter license, and for the people that are going to do the processing and the labs that are going to test it. All these people are going to put their applications in December, and then next year they're going to find out whether or not they got approved for their license. So then you got to start it all over again. The guy that runs a dispensary has no inventory until the people that got their licenses for growing can grow crops, and then that shit gets shipped over to the processor. All this takes time. A crop, you're talking about 6 months ish, for a crop to come out. Processor comes along, processes it, then it still has to sit there for another month or two as it dries and cures, and then you got by then you could probably have some medibles and some concentrates made, because you don't need to dry and cure. That is, depending on what you're making. You can make a lot of cannabis products, medical marijuana and otherwise, without actually like getting completely dried and cured buds. But not all. It's not going to be your bread and butter profit machine. So heed that, medical marijuana board, because I know that you guys are basically looking at this thing as like a big tax windfall. I've already heard your numbers, so you guys are not just expecting it, but you're basically banking on it. All right, board members were torn about how to address the issue of the existing dispensaries before ultimately deciding to leave Laura's announcement unchallenged. They also attempted to clarify with Briscoe the extent of the board's authority to clear up confusion about the legal process for crafting new rules. Donald Bailey, who originally made the motion to shut down current dispensaries in late August, said Tuesday he is trying to combat a medical marijuana black market. And by shutting down dispensaries that are out in the open, where everybody can see them, where the local municipalities already know who the players are, where the local municipalities probably already have them regulated and know that they're doing everything right. For some reason, you think that by shutting them down, you're going to fucking prevent the black market from existing. Well, to be honest, he thinks they are the black market right here. We don't want to see these dispensaries making these things and putting it into Michigan's own black market. I think he's talking about medibles and concentrates, perhaps. He's a retired state sergeant who used to work in drug enforcement. In fact, he was around when I've done the reporting on the Koshmiter situation, and I'm sure if you watch those videos and you want to know anything about that, he was on scene when that raid happened at Koshmiter's home, and basically he professed that he don't believe that marijuana is medicine and that everybody that participates in the program is just a bunch of people trying to get high. And whenever you go to comment sections on articles like this or other things in Michigan, I don't know if they're his friends or something, but there's people that echo them same sentiments in those comment sections. Oh, look at all you people that just want to get your stupid weed with your weed cards. And it's just annoying, man. It's beyond trollage when people are doing that, because there's real people that are getting real medicinal benefits from cannabis in Michigan and everywhere else that it's everywhere else, period, whether it's legal or not. And I'm of the belief system that it doesn't matter whether you think you're smoking recreational marijuana or not. If you're just getting high or doing dabs or whatever you want to call it, it's still medicine, and you're still putting stuff in your body that's going to cure stuff in your body that needs curing. If nothing else, it's going to help your immune system to fight off anything before you even get sick. So, all this talking shit about people just getting high, that's where Bailey's coming from, man. The law is pretty clear, Bailey said. I apologize to those who don't understand where I'm coming from, but I cannot be moved and I won't. This is a violation. And I can't be more clear about what I just said. That's where he's coming from. He just said it himself. Others on the board, such as Nicole Cover and Chairman Rick Johnson, that's the guy that was on Bailey's side before, he said clearly these dispensaries need to get shut down. I mean, sooner or later they got to go. That was his quote from the last meeting. And I think he's kind of right. And I heard one of the lawyers involved in the old medical marijuana program that got the law passed and whatever, he or maybe it was one of the politicians, whatever. One of the people that was involved in the original law getting written also said that, yeah, he can't see how these existing dispensaries are going to be able to remain open. Eventually, they're going to have to shut down. And it's like because you're going to have a regulated system where they're going to want to know what's going on, and if they let a dispensary that's outside of the regulations exist, people are going to be like, well, why not just do that instead of go through all these hoops and pay all these fees? Cover did say he's one of the board members. She is one of the board members. I'm sorry. Nicole Cover did say, we are not enforcers. We are not regulators. Quote, we're all just trying to navigate the lay of the land. Johnson withdrew his initial support for Bailey's motion to shutter dispensaries after Laura claimed that it's not within the board's authority or role to do so. It's up to law enforcement. But Laura will still issue emergency rules to render dispensaries operating without a license a potential impediment to the license plan. It consulted with Attorney General Bill Schuette's office to determine that it could do so, according to the department. That could mean that dispensaries that refuse to close by December 15th might have a harder time getting an official license from the state to operate once they are issued. The mid-December date, quote, will allow existing operations to wind down while also giving adequate time for patients to establish connections to caregivers to help ensure continuity of access, according to state press release. Man, that's come on, man. If these patients could have found a caregiver by now, don't you think they would have? And a lot of people are nervous to even become caregivers anymore. And by the way, caregiver numbers have gone down twice now. They got cut in half once and they got cut in half again. Now there is very few caregivers to cover, hundreds of thousands of people with medical marijuana cards. So this idea that people are going to all of a sudden be able to find caregivers is horseshit. And another sentiment that was brought into play, I believe it was last meeting, and I think it was Don Bailey again. He threw some number out there like, oh yeah, somebody with all their med cards can grow 72 plants. And each plant you get a pound of weed, a pound of usable medical marijuana. No, you don't. Especially when you're growing in a smaller operation, which this is a residential law that we are under right now. So not too many people had warehouses or big pole barn grows going. It's usually just a garage or a basement situation. And no, you don't get a pound a plant off of that kind of action. If you did, it would cost a lot of money because you're talking about using a lot of light power for one plant. So you would hope you would get 1 pound per plant. But the idea that, he's saying that, okay, we don't need these dispensaries because these caregivers that are already out there, and there's this many of them, and they're producing all these pounds, each plant's a pound, so blah, 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 blah. Basically what he's saying is there's a ton of weed out there, so I'm sure they'll be able to find it. That's what those dispensaries are for. That's like the crossroads of people with too much weed and people that can't find it. And by the way, what you're saying is that what Don Koschmider did wasn't illegal then. If you're saying that the caregivers are just willy-nilly allowed to provide random patients that all of a sudden can't go to the dispensary. They're just supposed to find a caregiver and be like, hey, can I get some weed? That's illegal according to all the people that have been arrested to doing it. All the dispensaries that have been closed down and people given tickets so far is because they transferred to medical marijuana to somebody who's not their patient or whatever you write, creative way you rewrite, somebody sold marijuana and it wasn't you. Laura sent the release just hours before a scheduled board meeting, during which officials tried to clarify whether pot shops would be shuttered or which state entity had the authority to enact closures if they did happen. Please don't say the state police and local law enforcement. I mean, what is the deal? Why don't you just have somebody from the town, the Chamber of Commerce of that town or whatever, contact the dispensary and be like, look, dude, you really, give them some chances. Obviously, try to opt in. And if you're operating a dispensary in a town where they're saying, oh, we're not going to do the licensing act, we're not doing that shit. I don't know what to tell you, man. I've been saying this since the licensing act became law last year. If you're operating a dispensary, you're fucking in the black. You're not in the black, you're in the gray, but you're not even in the gray, you're in the red. They've already said it's illegal in 2013, and I've been, saying all along that it's amazing that these people are sticking their necks out, and I love them for doing it, but you're all taking your chances. And, I see dispensaries in areas that said that they're not having the licensing act. They're not going to give you an application. They're not going to let you have a dispensary in that town. So after December 15th, are they just going to continue to let you operate like without being connected to that system? I don't think the state will. It's not even going to be up to local municipalities at that point. That's going to be the fucking state police coming in and just being like, look, guys, you're not in the regulatory system. Then you're completely, this isn't even gray market material. You're black market. So, yeah, I'm totally for the dispensaries being open until the last second. And maybe them dispensaries getting some kind of consideration or whatever, like if they have a stumbling block that they have with trying to get into the regulatory system, that should be worked out. That's what this board should be for, not just to be like, oh, shut them down. That's not what this board is for. And this board is a medical marijuana licensing board. Why is there a state police sergeant on there, former or otherwise? The way that I've heard the rhetoric, it's almost as if, Bailey's not a police officer anymore, but he's basically still so connected with the Michigan State Police that it doesn't even matter. It's like, oh, you're, sitting on a board that's supposed to license medical marijuana facilities, and you're concerned about how we can enforce things and put people in jail already. So I guess we're off on a rocky start. Here's a MLive article about the same thing, and I'm just going to read what they didn't have in the other one. So Bailey, after hearing the news of what happened with Laura this morning, moved to make the department the date. Wait, he said, yeah. Anyway, this is from the last meeting to this meeting. He said medical marijuana facilities were leaking marijuana into the recreational black market and other states, something that should be addressed with urgency. The recreational black market. Why is there a recreational black market there in Michigan? I wonder. Probably because there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of decriminalized areas, so there's a lot of people that don't care whether or not they have a medical marijuana card. And I don't know if you're observing them or what, but they can't just walk into a dispensary and buy marijuana because you have to have a med card for all that. So what do you expect? You think the black market's going to just like not exist when there's clearly a demand for people that do not want to participate in the medical marijuana program or otherwise, whatever, someone that just wanted to buy marijuana. Maybe they don't do it every day like a medical marijuana patient. Maybe they just do it like once in a while. So I don't know. I mean, you're just going to have to get used to the idea that, recreational marijuana, for whatever reason, is a huge thing. If you don't believe it, look at Colorado. Look at all the states that have legalized recreational marijuana. It's a boom. Are you kidding? It's booming. And these are places that have all had medical marijuana for years before the recreational started. So what you need to do is figure out real quick how to get on board with the recreational marijuana world, and stop, complaining that marijuana leaks from the medical marijuana into the, well, where else is it going to come from? Mexico? If that's the case, then the state police didn't do a very good job of protecting our state from drug cartels. I mean, you guys are so busy worried about medical marijuana that, literally there's a huge heroin epidemic in rural areas all over the state. Gee, I wonder what could have been done differently there. Also, you have a crystal meth problem breaking out in Michigan, something that has been going on for a couple decades, but it's been kind of just going out of just spiraling out of control. So what is going on there? We never hear about it. You hear about a meth lab getting busted here, or someone trying to cook up some shake and bake in a trailer park over there, but you don't hear about no big giant like rings of organized crime that's bringing this shit in getting busted, because they're too busy fucking with this medical marijuana shit. And it's absurd. This is just people trying to participate in an already legal system that has seen a 17% increase in arrests for marijuana since this system has been initiated in 2008. Do you think that you guys could figure out something better to do? Or is there a reason that we don't know about why you want to keep enforcing marijuana laws? And by the way, the Michigan state legislator is basically trying to play both sides of this and eat cake, have it too, and all that shit, because they're going to be like, well, you guys can't do this. We're going to bust you. But as soon as we get somebody in position that's regulated under our regulations, then everything's fine. What are you trying to say? Why is police enforcing medical marijuana laws in Michigan? Oh, I know, because it's still illegal federally. That's been the position of Bill Schuette's office since they started in 2008. That's been the position of everybody else in the world as far as this medical marijuana crap goes, like from every state there is, So anyway, quote, everybody wants information going forward. You want to know what we're thinking, and I'm telling you, it's a violation of the law. I'm not going to support someone who stays open. Now, before that was true, after tonight, that's no longer true, because that's not what we're thinking. And I think he only had Johnson on his side when he was talking about shutting them all down with police before September 15th. And, I guess, if, again, for the dispensary owners out there that are running dispensaries right now, just know that he's still well connected to the police. So this is a powerful statement that he's saying. Maybe when he says what we're thinking, you want to know what we're thinking. What? The state police? The state police is saying it's a violation of the law. This guy's a former DEA worker. He worked with the DEA. He trained with the DEA. He got an award for public safety. And you don't get those in firefighting and all that crap. You get those for making a certain amount of drug busts, or, making a drug bust where you had a certain amount of guns and money and piles of bricks of weed sitting on a curb somewhere. That's how you get public service awards. At the board's last meeting, people expressed concern that shutting down dispensaries so soon would force very sick patients into the black market looking for medicine. Quote, people will die, an audience member yelled out during Tuesday's discussion. And then the moderator started treating everybody like they were little babies. And, that's just another thing when you go to these public comments meetings in Michigan, is the people that run these meetings, the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, or this board or that board. I've been to a few of these things, man. They always treat citizens like you're a bunch of 3-year-old babies that need your fucking diaper changed. We're kind of getting sick of that too. So I'm just putting that out there. You guys work for us, man. Even the police. You know where the police's paycheck comes from? The fucking government. You know who the government's supposed to be? It's supposed to be us. So we're out here following the rules, and all of a sudden you guys want to come and crack heads. We made this marijuana law back in 2008. That was supposed to protect people. And it has been used against people way more than it has protected anybody that I've known or that I've seen go through this shit. I guess I already said a lot about what I heard people talking about. So again, we heard from patients that were essentially, the patients that were basically being threatened. I mean, Bailey was threatening the dispensaries with the arrests and the ugly shutdown where they take all your inventory and put evidence stickers on it and put everybody in jail for the night and give you like these fancy felony tickets and a whole list of them. So you got to fight down to. He was threatening dispensaries with that, but he was threatening patients with the prospect of going to the black market to get cannabis. And if you've lived in Michigan throughout the last 8 years, what you'll notice about the black market is that it all but shedded the Mexican brickweed that the black market used to be dominated by, my whole life. That's basically it. The black market had Michigan, wrapped up with Mexican weed up until about 2006, maybe. I mean, there was even an article in the Flint Journal talking about where's all the dirt weed. And I mean, that was like 5 years ago or something. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So the board, it seems like, is parted ways with Don Bailey on the idea that the board is going to exercise its authority to be some kind of a militant police thing, I guess. But what I'm really more concerned about is if this is 3 meetings, and all they did was talk about a deadline on December 15th. That's it. That's what this board did with 3 meetings. And essentially the December 15th deadline was already known about. That was written into the law, I'm pretty sure. So we already knew December 15th was some kind of a deadline where they had to have applications ready, where municipalities had to be, they had to make their rules like, we're going to have this. We're going to have this many dispensaries and this many grow facilities, and we're going to let transporters have businesses here, and we're going to have a testing facility over there. That was all supposed to be said and done by the 15th of December. Now we have a new rule. If you're a current dispensary owner and they already haven't kicked your door in, well, I guess you're safe until the 15th, at which time you go grab your application and put it in as you're turning your close sign around. All that inventory that you will have at the time, nobody knows what the fuck's going on with that. Nobody said anything about it. This meeting didn't address it. And the next one's definitely not going to address it. There's another meeting on October 17th at the Kellogg Center in East Lansing. So if you want to go, they're going to have public comments again. And that would be where, when and where. But I'm just going to say that all the comments I heard today, thank you. I mean, you have to sit there for the whole thing and you barely heard anything negative, and everybody basically booed the negative bullshit. There's no more room for reefer madness in Michigan, folks. If you stumbled on this video and you're one of those right-wing dicks that just hates weed and smokers of it, well, you lost big time today. Reefer madness lost big time today. Even though it doesn't seem like much of a thing. It's just, oh yeah, okay, well, you got until December 15th, and then, it's license time. Be careful what you ask for. But then again, this all goes back to that 2008 law. You heard the lawmakers say it was too vague and too many gray areas. You heard the people on the ground saying, we don't want to get arrested to set precedences. And then you seen Lansing sit on this shit while Bill Schuette was out there with his scare tactics and raids all throughout until finally the legislator said, okay, we're going to write some rules for dispensaries and shit. That was like 2013 or some shit. And then finally in 2016, they dropped the shit and everybody's like, oh no, how am I going to be able to comply with this? It's a mess, guys. And like I don't have a whole lot of faith that this public act is going to pan out too well. And I think Don Bailey's banking on that shit. So the Don Baileys of the world might get their way with this dispensary act being something that shuts down the whole program. So I guess we got to get out there and legalize marijuana. We have My Legalize / Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. They're almost done getting their signatures. And then you have Abrogate Prohibition of Michigan, which seeks to make a constitutional amendment that basically says prohibition is illegal. How about that? So either way, we got to do something about it, the people. And another thing that wouldn't hurt is vote the fuck out of these Republicans, man. I know the Democrats aren't offering much, but these guys need to be just getting the fuck out of town, man. And Don Bailey, representative of the Republican, picked on the board by a Republican. This Republican supermajority in Michigan has caused a lot of damage in a lot of areas, but this right here is one that really touches home to me. Let's vote them fuckers out for real.